Cool. So, good afternoon. I was about to see if you could hear me at the back, but I think you can. I've got that weird slot, so not quite lunchtime, not quite the last one before the bar, so hopefully there'll be enough in the next hour to keep people awake and keep people interested. Just before we kick it off, we wouldn't be here today without the sponsors, so big thank you to DevOpsGroup. Feels a bit weird saying that, but to System Frontier, to eSynergy Solutions, and to TechSnips. These types of events rely heavily on sponsorship, so thank you to everybody who for those organisations. In terms of questions, I've just been saying I don't think I've got an hour's worth of content if I just stand up here and rattle through it. So I'm really happy to take any questions as we go through the session. I'm conscious that not everybody is comfortable sticking their hands up and asking questions in a session like this. My DMs are open on Twitter. If anybody wants to ask me a question, send it through on Twitter. I'll ask it anonymously, and then we can answer it that way. That serves two purposes. For anybody who doesn't want to ask questions, it gives you a safe way to interact. It also means that as I look around the audience and see people staring at their phones, I can convince myself that you're all asking me questions. So who am I? So my name's Ed, and I am a DevOps product manager for the DevOps Group. So I started my career a fair few years ago now as a dev, and I've spent time moving through dev project management and into product management. So to get a feel for the room, how many people here would consider themselves on the dev side of DevOps? Okay, that got awkward. Ops? Okay. How many people consider themselves a manager? Okay, so ops heavy, not many managers. How many people consider themselves a leader within their organisation? Okay, a couple of hands. So we're going to talk a lot throughout this talk about leadership, and I just wanted to start with this quote here, which says, you know, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. And a lot of what we talk about in DevOps is about cultural change, about changing the way that organizations work, and one of the ways that we're going to do that is through changing our leadership. And I strongly believe that leadership is not something that's defined by our org chart, and leaders exist at all levels within our organizations. So the talk today, it's about these digital transformations and these journeys that organization and teams are going on at the moment. So we'll start off with a quick introduction to DevOps and digital transformation, just to make sure that we're all on, vaguely speaking, the same page. And then we've got sort of 7 things that I think we need to be doing within teams and within organizations to help people transition to the new way of working. And then finally, what about me, which is actually what about you? So if you're on this journey, what are the things that you can do personally to make it as successful and enjoyable an experience as it can be? So go big or go home. DevOps is changing the world. Whether you believe it or not, whether you like it or not, things are changing in our industry, and DevOps, I genuinely believe, is at the heart of a lot of what's changing. So I think all good talks start with a story, and all good stories start in the pub. So once upon a time in a pub far, far away, about 140 miles down the M4 in Cardiff, I was sat with my wife, and it was about February, March of this year, and it was dark, and it was cold, and it was raining, and all we could think about was whether or not we should go on holiday. So we got out the phone, and we started to have a little bit of a look over a pint, and found on Airbnb a really nice place in Croatia, and thought, you know what, in for a penny, in for a pound, let's book it. So we booked a flight on EasyJet in the pub on the phone, and then thought, actually, you need to make sure that I've cleared this with work. So I logged into our HR system, through the app, booked some leave, got it approved, happy days, still in the pub. Better get some car parking, because we've got to drive to Bristol. Better make sure we've got some holiday insurance as well, all still in the pub, either native apps or mobile-friendly websites. Didn't think too much about it now, got to a couple of days before we're due to fly out to Croatia, and realised that we'd got a whole load of stuff that we needed to buy. We didn't need to worry, because Amazon Prime, next day delivery, happy days. So we check into the EasyJet flight, again, using the app. We land in Croatia. We pick up the hire car that we booked online. And just as we're waiting for the hire car to come, we get a WhatsApp message from our Airbnb host telling us that we didn't need to wait until 4 o'clock to check in. The villa was available now. Head straight over. But if you come straight to the villa, you're then going to have to turn around and go back to basically where the airport is to go to the supermarket. So you'd be better off going to the supermarket before you come to the villa. Not a problem. Waze. Tap in supermarket. Happy days. So we get to the supermarket. We pay with our Monzo cards. We haven't bothered to take out any local currency. It's contactless all the way. And then we get to the villa, and my stepdaughter and nephew have been up since goodness knows what time. So the trusty old Fire Stick gets plugged in, connected up to the Wi-Fi in the villa. And we put Netflix on, and we all got a bit of peace. And then as the evening progressed, we sat outside in the hot tub, as you do, and we noticed that there were Bluetooth speakers in the hot tub. So we went on Google, got the instructions for the hot tub, worked out how to connect our phone to it, sat there in the hot tub in Croatia, listening to Spotify. And as we went through the week that we were out there, when we wanted to go out for dinner, we used TripAdvisor to tell us whether or not the place that we were thinking of going was as good as we hoped it would be. And when we all wanted to go out for dinner and nobody wanted to drive, we just called an Uber. And if you can tell me that DevOps is not changing the world, I don't think we're going to see eye to eye on that one. So this thing called DevOps, this thing that I would say is changing the world, what actually is it? So there's a fair few people here from DevOpsGroup. Ask any one of us what DevOps is. We'll probably give you a slightly different definition, but ultimately, DevOps is a set of patterns, practices, and behavior that are correlated with high-performing IT. So the ways of working that all of those organizations that you saw on that slide as we talked about my holiday in Croatia, they all share a set of cultural practices and a set of patterns which allows them to deliver application software with the speed and stability that they're doing it. So in a nutshell, DevOps is allowing organizations to deliver change to their customers with both speed and stability. But it's not just that. So DevOps is both an art and a science. And the reason I like to call this out is because we're not there yet. We don't know how to do all of this stuff in every type of organization and scale it to the levels that we need to scale it to. So we're all still learning. We're all still trying to work out how to do things at speed and at scale and stably. So it's an art and it's a science. And what we would, there is a model of DevOps that we talk about within DevOpsGroup. It's well known within the industry, and it's called the CALMS model. And it talks about DevOps as being built on a cultural foundation. So it's a culture of learning, and it's a culture of safety, and it's a culture of experimentation. And a lot of people, when they talk about DevOps, talk about automation. And automation is a really, really important part of DevOps. And I don't want to take anything away from that. Automation is what allows us to operate more quickly. It allows us to operate with more repeatability, and it allows us to take away the mundane toil that people have been doing for years and years and years, and allow those people to innovate. DevOps is also based on a lot of the principles of lean IT. So a lot of the things that we talk about when we talk about understanding what our value stream is, working in small batches, implementing Kanban, these are all things which have come from the lean community. So these are not new ideas that have come out in this latest buzzword of DevOps. These are well-known and well-understood patterns and practices which we are now starting to apply to IT. So the third pillar, and we'll come back to this in a little bit, is about measurement. So one of the things that we're trying to do as part of these DevOps transformations is we're trying to make people make decisions based on facts. So based on data and evidence and what is really happening within their organization. By taking the opinion out of this decision-making process, we take a lot of the animosity and a lot of the conflict away, because we're now making decisions based on what the data is telling us, not what I think or you feel. And then the final pillar within this DevOps model is sharing. So it's this idea that we're trying to break down these technical and cultural silos within organizations, that we're all trying to achieve the same goals. So let's all work together and share our knowledge and our experiences and our understandings, that we can all move along much more quickly by doing that. And then finally, on the top of those four pillars, we have DevOps transformation. So if you do all of these things, that's what's going to give you the DevOps transformation. That's what's going to allow you to compete with all of those organizations that we saw on the first slide. So if we go back to that first slide, we're looking at all of those organizations that are doing incredible things in a technical space. It's quite clear that a lot of organizations out there need to change. And it was John Cotter, I think, who put it quite well, where he basically said that the way that we've been working in years gone by isn't going to serve us right in this day and age. So we need to look at how do enterprises change in order to keep up with the fast-moving companies that are around them. And there's a number of areas that organizations need to change. And I think if you want to understand if an organization is doing DevOps or if you are DevOps, you need to look at these success factors that are listed here. So do you have an autonomous management style where you're pushing decision-making down through the org chart and letting the people closest to the problem give you the solution to fix it? Are we product-centric? Have we moved away from this age-old idea that we run a project for 2 years and when it's done, and the people that were on it can move on and work on something else, and that thing will continue to deliver value and somehow be supported by another team and maintained and kept secure? And are we working in that smallest possible batch size, or are we still running these big 2-3 year projects which deliver no value and then hopefully all of their value at the end? Or are we breaking down the problems into the smallest units that we possibly can, delivering those, getting them into the hands of our customers, getting feedback from the customers and delivering value early? And are we largely automating away the processes which have been traditionally very manual, very time-consuming, very risky, in order to allow people to focus on innovation, which is ultimately what we as people do really, really well. And why do we care? So we've talked about what DevOps is, but why should organizations change? It's all well and good me standing up here and telling you that you need to, but actually if we look at the data, so DORA is an American company, the DevOps Research and Assessment Organization, and every year they survey thousands of IT professionals around the world, and they draw some stats out of that survey. And what they're seeing in the 2018 State of DevOps report is that high-performance organizations, their high-performance businesses, is empowered by high-performance IT. And the DevOps patterns and practices will drive high-performance IT. And that will be, these are high-performing organizations who are deploying into production 46 times more frequently than the low performers. Their mean time to recover, should anything go wrong, is over 2,500 times quicker. They're 7 times less likely to have a production incident as a result of a deployment. And the key one for me is that their lead time for change is 2,500 times quicker. So the time from somebody in the organization having an idea about how they can deliver value to their customers and that feature getting into the hands of their customers is 2,500 times quicker. The net result of that is that these organizations are twice as likely to exceed profitability, productivity, and market share. And this applies in both profit and not-for-profit organizations. So I believe that DevOps is changing the world, and I hope for most organizations this is sort of the evidence of it. So does digital transformation matter? I mean, I don't know how many people are sat here in local government or in organizations that they're not affected by any of those companies that we saw on that first slide. So warning to anybody who has ever worked in marketing or knows our marketing team, might be better if you look away now. So this is a slide which IDC put out, which shows how industry and market segments are currently being disrupted. And actually, why I wasn't too concerned about having this made to look pretty, the fact that you can't read it kind of proves my point. There isn't an industry at the moment that isn't ripe for disruption, and there isn't an industry at the moment that isn't being disrupted. So this is the kind of analyst way of looking at it. This is what IDC say. I think that sums it up even better. Amazon is coming. And most industries at the moment are, this is a very real threat now, that there are lots of, these big organizations out there who understand data, they understand technology, and they understand what their customers want. So we've set the scene. We're heading off on this DevOps journey now. How do we get started? We've accepted that we need to change. So it all starts with a vision. So we need to understand where we're going and why we're trying to get there. So we need to create this North Star. So this idea that we're going to get to this place, and when we get there, life is going to be better. And what we can do by creating that is create a sense of excitement within the teams and start to bring people on the journey with us. And one of the things to keep in mind here is when people don't know what the future holds, they tend to get quite scared. So we need to give them an idea of where we're going. They don't need all of the details, but they need to know why we're going on this journey. And probably the most important thing is they need to know how their life is going to be better and how we together are going to get there. And there's a number of ways that you can help people to identify with this vision, and one of those is kind of loosely illustrated here, but and is called objectives and key results, which I don't know if anybody's familiar with. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to take our organisational goals and our vision, and we're trying to get our employees to relate to them, to see why increasing my unit test coverage as a dev is helping the organisation. And by using a structure of OKRs or something similar to this, we can connect the people who are doing the work with the lofty vision that's been set out. And if we do this right, the things that the people are doing at the bottom are the things that they have decided are the right things to do to help us get closer to that goal.
Example?
Thanks for putting me on the spot there, Mark. So when I said we would take questions, it was anybody apart from DevOpsGroup. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example off the top of my head. This could go really badly wrong. So let's say, Mark, you're a dev and you're working in a .NET environment, standard dev team. You're a good dev. You don't need to write unit tests because you're a good dev. Now, Ed, so next to you is the CEO. What Ed cares about is customer experience on our web application that we work on. One of the measures that Ed has come up with is we're going to measure customer experience by the amount of time that our website is up versus the amount of time that it's down. And as we filter down through the organisation and the decision-making process, we get back to you as a developer and saying, how can you, as a developer doing your day job, help achieve Ed's vision of maximising the uptime that our site is up? And if the way that you decide to do that is by increasing the unit test coverage in the code that you're writing, you can have a set of key results that say, we're going to increase the amount of unit test coverage. But now your motivation to do that isn't to drive up an arbitrary number on your build server. It's actually taking us closer to something much more important and much more significant. So I don't know if that answered your question. Thanks. So digital transformation, we often forget that people are at the heart of this transformation. But the ones that we forget about the most, I think, is the customer. So whenever we're going on this journey, the customer is the heart of everything that we are looking to do as part of a digital transformation. And because I like this slide so much, we're going to use it again. So not only is Amazon coming, but Amazon is here. And in seriousness, I think what Amazon have done is they've changed the landscape for anybody who deals with consumers. So a few years ago, when Amazon set up, they were an online bookshop. And they've evolved over the following years now to sell all manner of things to all manner of people. But we now live in a world, when I'm going on holiday and I'm flying at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, and I've forgotten to buy a pair of flip-flops or whatever it may be, I know that I can order them on Amazon, and Amazon Prime will deliver them to me for the next day. So I live in a world when I'm forgetful and a little bit lazy, possibly, and maybe a bit distracted, Amazon will help me out. When I go and remortgage my house, why does it take 6 weeks for the paperwork to go through? My expectations now are this is something that I should be able to do online. I should be able to do it relatively painlessly. The mortgage company knows who I am because they've been mortgaging my house for the last 5 years, but I still have to send a whole load of paperwork in, which I've had signed and witnessed and goodness knows what. So my expectations now are that this is not a good level of customer service. The fact that I have to go and see my GP to order a repeat prescription as opposed to just hitting an app on my phone is frankly crazy in this day and age. And there's a really good example, I think, that came out of a US company called Lemonade, who are an insurance company of all things. And this is a story from 2016, I think. And it concerns a chap called Brandon, who had a very nice Canada Goose Parker, which, for whatever reason, he needed to claim for on his insurance. So he did what most people would do, and at about 10 to 5, he submitted a claim to his insurance company, who were a new insurance company, so he did it via an app, for his $1,000 Parker jacket. The insurance company, as you would expect, took some time to review the claim and cross-reference it with his policy to make sure that he was actually insured. They then ran 18 anti-fraud algorithms against it. They approved his claim. They sent some wiring instructions into the bank. And 3 seconds after he submitted his claim, the money was in his bank. So when we say digital disruption is changing the way customers think their organizations and the organizations that they are customers of should behave, this is a really, really good example. And there's nothing grates you more when you're putting in an insurance claim and filling in paperwork and knowing that it can be done in this way. And if I know that I've got insurance company A and insurance company B, and one of them offers this service and the other makes me fill in paperwork, I'm fairly sure I know who my business is going to in the next time I renew. So the question is, how can you compete with these organizations if you don't understand what your customer wants? And IT traditionally has always been quite a long way removed from our customers. We've been focusing on outputs rather than outcomes. So we've been doing the work that largely has been dictated to us by the organization. And so this is a model of kind of the old world, as it were. So this is how organizations have been designed for a long time, where we've been optimized by role. So the business, another pet peeve of mine, but the business come along with an idea, and they throw it into various departments, and it gets to PMO, who spin up a project, happy days. And then we get a whole load of BAs that tell us what we need to do. And then technical architecture tell us what they think we need to build in the way they think we need to build it. And then it gets to the development team who have a quick look at it and send it back to the ivory tower and tell the architects that they're dreaming. We have a couple of iterations there. Finally, the devs have built something. They throw it over the fence to QA, who probably bounce it back a couple of times. Months have gone past by now, but it's all right, because we've finally built and tested the thing that we're going to put into production. So we'll hand it over to service delivery team to do whatever they do there. And finally, our friends in ops are going to get that thing running. And eventually, our customer gets the thing that they may or may not want, because we don't know, because it's taken us potentially months, if not years, to get this idea into the hands of our customers. So one of the things that we talk about in DevOps is realigning our organization so that we're creating smaller, more agile teams that are optimized by flow. And when we say optimized for flow, what we're saying is that these teams are optimized to get the idea into the hands of the customer as quickly as possible. And the way we do that is by empowering product owners or service owners in some instance to make prioritization calls based on what they believe the needs of the customer to be, and to balance the needs of the customer with the technical debt and improvement work that all products and services need. We have these cross-functional delivery teams that have all of the skills that we need to deliver and potentially run this product in production, then that is a disputed fact. You don't have to be build and running to be working in this way. And then ultimately, we're getting that value into the hands of our customer as quickly as possible and getting feedback from them as to whether or not we're building the right thing. It's very, very hard to be agile in the first model. You may have some agility in that dev QA function, that we're agile because we're working in Scrum, so we're doing 2-week sprints. But if our whole end-to-end process is 18 months, where's the actual agility? So one of the things that we're looking to do is to optimize by flow and to reduce handoffs and queue sizes, to reduce that batch size, so we're shipping the smallest thing we can to find out whether we're building the right thing, and ultimately improve cycle time. Given the audience, I suspect there's a lot of doubters in the room sat there going, I'm an ops guy. I work in infrastructure. This product development model doesn't work for me. Bear with me. So if we follow that model, we often end up with an organization that's aligned like this. So we've got lots of delivery teams now who are delivering functionality into the hands of our users. Across the top of that, we've probably got some form of triage or SRE function providing some operability, and usually a service desk which is taking feedback from our customers. What we like to advocate then is this idea of a platform model underneath it. So to all the ops people in the room, this is typically where our ops teams live. And just because the product that you're shipping isn't a customer-facing web application doesn't mean that you don't have customers and you're not shipping products. So you might be part of the infrastructure team who's providing core infrastructure services. You might be providing VMs and CI/CD pipelines. You might be providing database platforms as a service. But the key is that we are providing all of this stuff as a service. So those delivery teams who are building customer-facing products are consuming your products and services in order to do that. And in an ideal world, they're consuming it through an API layer. So the idea that just because we work in ops and just because we work in an infrastructure-heavy world and just because we are traditionally not seen as customer-facing product teams doesn't mean that we can't be customer-facing product teams. So taking people on that journey. What I've just shown you is probably quite different to how a lot of organisations are currently structured and how a lot of people work. And that's quite a scary thing. And we've talked about people being at the heart of this journey, those being customers. It's also the people in your teams who are at the heart of that journey. And before you start to go off down this path, I think you need to ask yourselves, how much do you really understand your organisation? And the phrase, I did get asked if I was playing bullshit bingo when I came up with this next slide, so I do apologise. But I thought the phrase organisational currency really summed it up quite nicely. So for me, the idea behind organisational currency is understanding what really matters in your organisation. Because if you don't understand what matters, how can you understand how it's going to impact on the people when you change it? So what do we mean by this? So there are going to be people within organisations, the thing that is important to them, the things that they have spent their career building may be organisational values. So they may be things like the size of their budget, the size of their team. It could be the length of time that they've spent in the organisation. These are the things that define good within the organisation and between those people and their peers. It could be technical. You could be a technical specialist in a particular language. It could be a particular technology. You could be deemed the exchange person who's been keeping this exchange infrastructure running for the organisation for 15 years. Are you feeling positive or threatened by Office 365? It could be cultural. In terms of it could be your management style that defines you within the organisation. You may be the person who, sorry to use the bad language, but gets shit done. We're now talking about autonomous teams where we're pushing decision-making down the org chart to the people who are closest to the problem. If you've defined your career by that slightly old-fashioned management style and your way of actually getting people to get things done, are you going to feel positive about the fact that we want to change the organisation, or are you going to feel slightly resistant to it? And it could be, you're a functional expert or that you used to work for Company X. And if we're pivoting our company and Company X is no longer our biggest competitor and your credibility for having worked for them is now diminished, how does that leave you feel? So the question I think that we need to ask is what is important to us? And I was really fortunate to be at a conference a couple of weeks ago, DevOps Days London. And we had a really interesting conversation. And I thought it summed up this idea of organisational currency really well. And we had a conversation about Charlie. And Charlie joined the organisation that they worked for back in the late 90s. And they built out a parts reconciliation middleware application that was launched in the early 2000s. Since then, Charlie's been enhancing and maintaining and supporting this application. Charlie happens to be our resident COBOL expert. And Charlie is suspicious of microservices and doesn't believe Java is performant or scalable, because Charlie's place in the organisation is defined by the fact that Charlie is our COBOL expert. So let's flip this story on its head. Let's meet Charlie. Charlie joined our organisation as a mid-level developer in 1998. Charlie has an in-depth understanding of all of our core middleware. Charlie has a better grasp of the nuances of our business logic than anybody else in the organisation. Charlie understands what it takes to scale and integrate our systems. Charlie knows where the bodies are buried. Charlie is excited about the technical challenges ahead. We need to understand what people value, and we need to help them to understand what the organisation values about them. If you've got people in your organisation who've been working there for 20 years, and their value is the fact that they know a programming language better than anybody else, we are doing those people a disservice. And if we can get those people to understand what we value about them, and we can understand what we value about them, when we start to change things around them, they're going to be much happier to come on this journey with us because we're not pulling the rug from underneath them and we're not saying the thing that you have spent 20 years being good at is no longer important to us. So change is hard, okay? Any time that you have to change people or change organizations is going to be difficult. And in fact, Harvard's Business Review back in, I think, the early 2000s put out a really insightful and incredibly helpful article which said that 70% of change initiatives fail. I genuinely think this is bullshit for two reasons. The first one was, if you read the article, it's not actually what they said. But more importantly, we're asking people to change. We're asking people to come on a journey with us, and we're asking people to do something that's inherently quite difficult. If we tell them that what they're doing is in all likelihood going to fail anyway, how are we in any way motivating to come on this journey with us? Human nature suggests that if we tell somebody that what they're doing is A, very difficult, and B, likely to fail, they're going to kick that can down the road until the next change initiative comes on and they can keep their job as COBOL developer and life will go on happy days. The response to that HBR article came from a chap called Nick Tassler in about 2017, and I really, really like this quote when he said, "Change is hard in the same way that it's hard to finish a marathon. Yes, it requires significant effort, but the fact that it requires effort doesn't negate the fact that most people who commit to a change initiative will eventually succeed." So now what we're saying to people is, come with us. This is going to be tough. This is going to be a journey, and we're not going to get everything right the first time. But if we all pull together, we all work hard, we will get to that place and we will realize the vision that we've set out. But we do have to acknowledge that change is hard. And one of the things that we would be doing people a disservice to is if we said, you know, this is straightforward. And I think it's important to understand why it's hard. So as we go on this journey, we are all likely to get to this place that's called the trough of disillusionment. So we start off on a journey and things are going great, and then we end up and it just feels like we're wading through treacle. And this is a fairly common model in change theories. But one of the things that's quite interesting is to start to layer other models over the top of it to understand why change is hard. So this is based, I think, on the Dunning-Kruger model. And actually, the way I read this is not that we've hit a trough of disillusionment and things have just got hard. The fact was, they were always hard. We just didn't know enough to know how hard it really was. But what's really important about these types of models is that everybody is going to go through this dip at some point, and different people are going to go through it at different points. And if you're going on these transformation journeys with people, I think your role as a leader, and I go back to my point about leaders existing at all levels of our org chart, is to understand where people are on this graph and to help them through it. And because most of us are technologists, you know, there is a third model that we can layer over the top of this, which I think is really, really useful. So this came again from the State of DevOps report 2018, put out by Dora. And what it does is it actually talks about why change is hard from a technical perspective and why organizations sit at the bottom of this trough of disillusionment from a technical perspective. And what they're saying is that as you start off on a DevOps journey and a digital transformation, basically there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. So there's a lot of stuff that we've been doing manually for years that we can automate away, and we can start to see some really quick wins. Once we start to realize those quick wins, we create a whole load of technical debt for ourselves. So things like test automation, environment automation, which are, you know, we haven't been doing, now suddenly become blockers. So we've gone really quick to start with. We've hit what that Gartner said, the peak of inflated expectation, and now we've got a load of hard work that we need to keep on powering through in order to come out the other side. What they are telling us and what the data and the evidence is telling us is that if we keep focusing on doing the right things, we will come out the other side. So while it's tough at the time, it's a very clear trajectory to get out of this change curve and to become a high-performing IT department and to deliver the benefits that we saw on the slide, you know, 15 minutes ago or so. So the final thing that we need to remember when we're talking to people is, if we're talking to people about transformation, they don't trust us. They hear us say transformation, they hear us say reorg, and then they actually hear job losses. So the thing that we need to just keep reiterating to people is that we are not going on these transformation journeys to reduce headcount. We're doing it to keep up with the disruptors. And the cold, hard fact of the matter is IT has and has always had too much work. We're fighting really hard to catch up at the moment. We're not getting ahead of anything. We are literally trying to catch up and go as quick as we can, and we can't do that by getting rid of people. There is a really good talk by a chap called Rob England who talks about a thing called Humane IT. He's spoken at a number of DevOps Enterprise Summits. And the thing that he talks about here when he talks about that emotional part of a DevOps transformation, and it was a quote that I really liked, was he said that there are going to be people ultimately who don't want to come on this journey with you, and that's fine. You know, we need to make sure that people are on the bus or they're off the bus, but nobody is under the bus. And if we have people on our teams who don't want to come on this journey, we have a duty and an obligation as leaders within organisations to make sure that they exit humanely. So, other things that IT have traditionally been really bad at. So, as IT folk, we need to learn to tell stories. The most important question you're going to get asked as you go on this journey is, so what? And if we go back to the start, so we put this model of calms up at the start, I just want to call out the importance of measurement. So in order to tell stories and in order to tell people how far we've come, we need to be able to articulate where we are today. So it's really important that we understand where we've come from and what our pain is. Why are we going on this journey? What is the pain that we're trying to alleviate? And how can we quantify that? And most importantly, are we doing anything with the data that we're capturing? So quick show of hands, how many people are working in some form of agile? That means they have retrospectives that may be called something else. Yeah? Loads of post-it notes, loads of stuff written on a wall. Sometimes it gets transferred into Confluence. How many times do we ever do anything with that information? A few guilty faces. Okay, so one bit of advice that I can give you, if you're going on this journey, look back through your last 6 months worth of retros, look at the pain points that the team have been calling out and use that to create a narrative around where we are today and why we need to change. And once we've been on this journey, as technologists, as IT pros, we need to learn to celebrate success, and we need to learn to do that by telling stories. So I think this is probably going to be a fairly familiar story for a lot of people. In the last 6 months, this team been working really hard. We've managed to reduce the amount of time it takes to create an environment from 4 weeks to an hour. I think there's been a couple of talks about that topic today. We've increased the first-time acceptance of environments from 37% to 92%. And we've increased unit test coverage, go Mark, from 32% to 85%. And we've automated application deployment with Octopus Deploy. The business does not care. The business doesn't care that you've done all of that great stuff. And it is great stuff, and it is important work. But by going to the business and telling them that we've just deployed Octopus Deploy, the only question you're likely to get is, how much is that costing me in licensing? So why don't we flip that story on its head? And why don't we tell the business that over the last 12 months, we've reduced the time to implement and deploy new features from 9 months to 4 weeks. And when we deployed feature X, Y, Z into production in 4 weeks, it generated 175 grand a week in revenue. And what we're telling them that their ROI for the 8 months that would have been sat in a backlog was £6 million. If you tell stories in language that the business understands, they will get on board with the journey that we're trying to go on. So there was a question earlier in Raj's talk about how do we convince the business, how do we convince the C-level that this is a journey to go on? Well, the way we do that is we have success and we tell stories in the language that they want to hear. So don't sit in front of your CEO or your CFO and tell them this story about how great your automation is. Sit in front of them and tell them how much money you've just made them. That will get buy-in from the senior level. That will allow you to accelerate your transformation. So the six out of 7 now, we're not going to get everything right the first time. We need to start to operate in an environment where failure is an option. So we need to fail fast, which means we need to fail at the soonest possible point in our development process, and we need to fail safe. So we need to do it without bringing down the organisation. So what does that mean? So culturally, failure needs to be treated as trigger an inquiry and be treated as an opportunity to learn. So that culture of blame and of finger pointing, we need to work out how do we flip that on its head and learn from things that go wrong. And we do that by optimizing both our technology, so we have a better visibility of what's happening in our estate. We have better alerting and monitoring. We're using proactive monitoring to tell us that things are going downhill, not that they've just exploded. But also culturally, how do we create those feedback loops where people feel safe to talk about why things went wrong in the first place? And final one is we need to minimize the blast radius. So it's much easier to talk about this in a technical sense, but we do this by making small changes, by getting that small batch size down and that fast flow of features. We're changing something very small. The impact of that thing must be less than us pushing this 18-month project into production in one go, because, hey, what can go wrong with that one? So the question that I really love, and for anybody who works in any form of development, I think, do we know if we've made progress on this journey? I think we ask ourselves this question. Would you let a new dev deploy a changed production on day one? If not, why not? If the answer to this question is yes, you have all of the protection in place to make sure that you have done all of the things we talked about on the previous page. If you're taking new devs in and it's 6 months before you're letting them go anywhere near your CI/CD pipeline and push anything to anywhere, we need to look at why that is. And so the sort of final thing that I think we need to look at in teams is this idea of psychological safety. So we're taking people on a journey. We're expecting them to fail along the way. It's going to be hard. So what do we mean by psychological safety? So this came, I think, from Google's Rework series of reports, when they said that if you have psychological safety, team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. The research that came out of Google said that when they looked at the makeup of their teams, the highest performing teams, it had nothing to do with the mix of engineering skills. It had nothing to do with the backgrounds of the people within the teams. It's simply to do with whether or not those teams had what they called psychological safety. And what they said was who is on the team matters less than how the team members interact, structure their work, and view their contributions. Which all sounds very, very nice, but somewhat ethereal. So how do you know if you've got psychological safety within your teams? Well, one of the ways you can know that you haven't got it is silence. So silence is the antithesis of safety. If nobody is asking questions in your sprint planning meetings or in your retros or in your architectural design sessions, then you haven't created that environment where people feel safe to contribute. And some of the ways that you as leaders can try and overcome that is framework as an experiment and acknowledge and accept that there is uncertainty. Okay, this stuff's difficult. We don't have all of the answers. So as leaders, put that out there within meetings that we want contributions from the people in the teams. Again, as leaders, we need to learn to be humble. We need the decisions to come up from the teams, not down from the tops. And you can ask questions and promote inquiries within the teams that you're leading and that you're working in. So we've talked a lot about teams. The last sort of 5 minutes, I just want to talk about me, but it's actually you. So people going on this journey, so for the people in the room who are either leading these transformations or have got people within their teams, you're either leading it or you're in teams which are being taken on this journey. What can you do to make it as painless as it possibly can? And actually, it was quite apt, actually, that today is World Mental Health Day, purely by coincidence. And it got me reflecting on a conversation that I had again at DevOps Days London a couple of weeks ago. And there was about 8 to 10 of us sat in a room talking about transformations and talking about how it felt to be going on the journey. And a few of the words that came out was challenging, lonely, exhausting, uncertain, frightening, stressful. And I think it was Raj who mentioned earlier that, you get close to tears on these journeys at some point. And I think there's a lot of people in the room who were, they felt quite safe to say, I've been at that point when, I just don't know if I can keep doing this because it is really, really hard work. So what can we do about it? Okay, the first thing we need to do about it is remember that it really is worth it. Okay, if you go on this journey, when you start to come out the other side, if you're lucky enough to get feedback like this from the people that you're working on your teams with, you know you're doing a good job. And all of the sleepless nights and the hard work starts to pale into insignificance when you realize that people want to now come to work. They're enjoying what they're doing, they're feeling fulfilled, and they get a new sense of purpose because of the changes that you've helped to make in the teams. And this can be team-level change. This doesn't have to be top-down transformation. So in order to do that, I think it's really important that as leaders, and I strongly believe that leaders do exist at every level in the organisation, you need to understand your role. So, we need to be humble. We need to lead by example. So lead through change. You need to work with the people in your teams to develop their capabilities. And you may be a dev with a couple of years experience, but there are things that you can teach the people in your teams. This doesn't have to be coming from people who are scarred and about that. Emotional intelligence. You need to understand when the people in your teams are at that pit of trough of disillusionment. Understand when they need you to wrap your arm around them and give a little bit of moral support, and when they need to be pushed and challenged and driven. And turn strategy into action. There's nothing worse than sitting in a team and all you hear about these initiatives coming down from on high, but they don't actually mean anything. How do we make that vision and that strategy actionable to actually make a difference within our teams on a day-to-day basis? So you wear a lot of hats in this digital transformation. Sometimes you're going to be a consultant and you're telling people the best way to do things. Sometimes you're going to be a coach and you're helping to get the best out of people, and sometimes you're going to be mentoring them to try and get them to come to the solution on their own. The most important thing that we need to start doing is we need to start leading people and not managing them. We employ brilliant people for the most part in these organisations, so let's not sit them in a cubicle and tell them what to do. Let's give them the environment and the tools and the circumstance to be the best that they can be. And finally, leaders exist at all levels in the organisation, so just because you're not, you don't have lead or principal or manager or whatever in your job title doesn't mean that you don't have a responsibility to the people around you to help them on this journey. So the other thing that it's really important to do if you're going on this journey, particularly if you're some sort of delivery manager or transformation lead, is make sure you are working on the right things. That's working on the important things. There will always be too much work to do in a digital transformation. It's really important that we focus on the important stuff. If anything you are doing is in the not important part of the Eisenhower matrix, stop doing it. You either delegate it away, eliminate it, automate it, you do whatever you need to do, but that's not a good use of your time. And the most important box is number 2. It's important, not urgent work. That's where the magic happens. We need to carve out time to plan when we are going to do the important work. If you spend all your time doing the important, urgent firefighting work, we're not actually moving ourselves forward. So the most important thing to do is spend some time to work out when we're going to do stuff that's going to move the team or the organisation forward. And I think the last one, and a lot of these points come from this book here, which is a brilliant book on performance. It's really important to accept that transformations are really hard. Raj talked about it, earlier. It was a long 3 years for him at BAE. So what can you do to kind of make sure that you come through that with the right sort of mental headspace? So let's accept that stress can be positive. Okay, the analogy that they use is stress is like a muscle. If we stress it, if we get better at dealing with it, we get stronger. But you don't get stronger in the gym, so you can't be in that state of stress all of the time. We need to find ways to moderate that. So we've got periods of stress and we've got periods of release. So we need to get into this mindset where time away from work is time well spent. I think there was a quote that the music is made in the space between the notes. And I think that applies to transformation. It's the time away when you get the clarity to work out what to do next, not when you're head down firefighting and in the midst of it. Find out, this is a personal one for me, find out what works for you to get real sleep. So how do you get to work the next day feeling relaxed? And for me, it's exercise. If I don't carve out the time to train, I don't sleep as well, I'm not as good at my job. So for me to take 2 hours out for a run is not 2 hours when I'm not at work and not delivering, it's 2 hours when I'm getting better at delivering the next day. And those hobbies and interests will keep you sane. Try and hang around with people who don't work in IT. I know it's hard, but let's let's just please try and find some people that have normal jobs and can give us a slightly different perspective on life. And everybody wants a list. So top 5 things that I would do. So this can be organizational-wide transformation. It could be team-level transformation. Find something small, start with that, but make sure it matters. The last thing you want to do is put a whole load of time and effort into changing something and then have some smart ass come along and go, so what? So let's make sure that thing that we're working on is both safe and important. So make sure it's safe, minimize the blast radius. Build champions. You can't do this on your own. So you're going to need to have people who are going to evangelize for you and help take the organization on the journey. But here's a hint. When you start telling people that we're going to embrace this whole DevOps thing and you're going to change the way we're working and we're going to realign into cross-functional teams, spot the grumpy so-and-so sat in the corner with their arms folded going, this shit's never going to work. Make them your champion. Because if you can win them over, the rest of the organization is an absolute walk in the park. Learn to tell stories. We talked about it earlier on. We need to celebrate success much better as an industry than we do. And we do that by telling stories. And finally, join a community. It could be local meetups, it could be online, it could be other professional groups, but you're not going on these transformation journeys on your own, so find out where those people are and have the conversations with them. And the last thing, I'm stealing the title of Raj's talk from earlier, sorry mate. DevOps is a really interesting discipline because there's not a lot new here. I might get fired for saying that, but DevOps in and of itself is a collection of ideas and patterns and practices that exist elsewhere within IT or within other industries. So we need to remember that what we're doing here is we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and there's a whole raft of material out there that will help on this journey, and I think a few of them listed here. A few others. So I've created an Amazon wish list, which has all of these books listed, so you don't have to worry too much about taking them down. But a couple that I would call out. Radical Candor is brilliant if you're working with teams and you're going to have some of those difficult conversations. I think Radical Candor is probably one of the best books on there. Measure What Matters is the OKR Bible that'll tell you how to implement Measure What Matters, and I should have just said read that instead of trying to answer Mark's question. Obviously, the Phoenix Project is the definitive DevOps book. It was based on the goal, both of which are brilliant. But for me, there's not a bad book on there. I appreciate that reading isn't for everybody. Beyond the Phoenix Project, lousy book, brilliant audio book. So it's an audio transcript of a conversation between Gene Kim and John Willis, and they talk about what came before and what came after the Phoenix Project. So it'll give you a lot of insight to a lot of the lean, safety culture, Deming, all of that good stuff. A lot of the stuff that's in here came from and comes from and is pushed through TED Talks. There's some credible stuff out on the TED platform that's really worth digging into. And personally, if you've got an understanding employer like I am lucky enough to have, you can't beat going to meetups and summits and conferences and actually getting to talk to people who are going through the same sort of journey that you are. Enterprise Summit, for some organizations and for some people, it's prohibitively expensive. Don't tell my boss this, but all of the talks are online afterwards, so you can actually get a lot of the value by not going to the event. Watch the talks afterwards. DevOps Days London is very community focused. It's very kind of practitioner led. Lots of hands-on experience and lots of open spaces where people get to talk about what's working and what's not working for them. And Winops coming up in a couple of weeks is a kind of DevOps on Windows, way more techie focused than the other two, but I can strongly recommend it. If anybody wants to hit me up on Twitter and wants to go to Winops, I have a discount code for the tickets as well. Sorry, shameless plug. So finally, can I do this? Digital transformation, it is hard. I'm going to finish with a quote. And as all good quotes, it came from Twitter. So Brad Stulberg wrote the book, Peak Performance. And he says, a fraud is something that just about everyone feels like at some point. There are two primary ways to shed this feeling. If you aren't acting authentically, start acting authentically. And hopefully some of the hints and tips that we've talked about for the last hour will help do that. Remind yourself that no one has all of their shit together. That's just part of being human. Imposter syndrome is real. It affects everybody. Nobody's got their shit together all of the time. You will be fine. Thank you very much. And when it comes to shameless self-promotion, we are hiring. If anybody's interested to come and work with the DevOps group, please speak to our recruitment team. Has anybody got any questions other than Mark? Raj?
So what roles are you hiring for?
all of them. Man, you'd have thought somebody worked in marketing. I've taken the slide out. Sorry, we are running a webinar on the 18th of October, cloud adoption. State of DevOps report this year said that if you want to maximize, if you want to be a high-performing IT department, just doing cloud isn't good enough. You need to do cloud right, and there are 5 practices that they've outlined that will help you maximize the benefit of cloud. Any questions on something I actually know anything about? Cool. Thank you all very much.